Rosemary. We haven't yet got Peter.
I've just let Peter in right now.
Right. Okay, great.
It says it's pending on my screen.
Oh. Right, there he is. Morning, Peter.
Morning. Sorry, connection issues. Over there.
Right, good. Okay, Jenny, are you ready? We'll get going, I think. Right. First item, apologies for absence. Any apologies received? No. Okay. We don't have a Surrey County Council representative here, do we, I think? So I don't know whether that was an apology or just an absence. No?
Sorry, I'm getting a few feedback issues here. Apologies we've got from Shona and Richard and Councillor Natalie Bramhall as well.
Ah, right, okay. Right, thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. So that was the meeting held on the 14th of December. I've just got a couple of, they're not really actions, but perhaps a couple of matters arising, which I might just take now. We didn't have Danielle from Amy at the meeting in December, and it was stated that the contract improvement plan was delayed, but was expected to be provided to the group the following week. I don't think we were ever provided with that, were we?
I wasn't aware of that action, but I've got the improvement plan today, and it was presented at the previous meeting as well in February.
Right, so yeah, so that's going to be presented today.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, fine. And I know that we reported in December that SCC were hoping to reduce their SEP contribution by £300,000. Well, those of us on the SEP meeting last week know that that was negotiated downwards to £100,000, but that may be part of something that Kelly is going to cover later on. And it would also be nice to have an update on any relocation plans that JWS might have, because I know that you're thinking of leaving Duke's Court, but that hopefully will come up later as well. Okay, do members have any other issues with the minutes of the previous meeting, or can we accept that as being a correct record of the meeting in December? Okay, no hands up, so we'll move on. Thank you. Do members have any declarations of interests? These should be a declaration of any disclosable pecuniary interests. Any declarations? No. Okay, none from me. Thank you. Okay, item number 4 then, quarterly performance report. Is that Kingsley? Going to leave that?
Yes, it is, Councillor. I'm just going to share my screen. Right, yes, so this is the quarterly performance, quarter 3, 2023 to 2024, and it is comparing the rolling tonnage up to 2023 compared to up to December 2022. So just looking at this is tonnages. So for all materials, Surrey and JWS also increases in all materials. Elmbridge at the highest with 3.1%. DMR saw decreases, Woking having the lowest decrease. Food was also decreases, and garden also saw increases. And then residual was mostly stable. Mole Valley and Woking did have a decrease, and Surrey he saw a slight increase. So when I meant stable, I meant Surrey. Whole Surrey was stable. The Surrey Heath one has been a continuing trend. We are looking into that and see why that is. However, generally, all material generally has a slow increase. So with DMR and food has slowed down in their decrease. Also, the garden has slowed in its increase. And Mole Valley, the trend is kind of the same. Sorry, not Mole Valley. Sorry, residual. The trend has kind of said the same, but Mole Valley has a decrease this quarter that we're actually not sure about. So we're going to see what the pattern is next quarter. So this is the recycling rate. So quarterly, Surrey and Woking saw a bit of a decrease on the quarterly rate, but in the 12-monthly rolling rate, Surrey and Surrey Heath have kind of remained stable, while Elmbridge, Mole Valley, and Woking have all seen increases. This is dried mix recycling. On the left is Surrey Environmental Partnership, and on the right is the joint authorities. As you can see, there is still a decline, but the decline seems to be slowing down a little bit. This is food. Trends are similar. There's a decline for food. This is green. Once again, trends are very similar. There is a decline. I think you can see on the right, most of these on the right side, the joint authorities, the trend line is kind of becoming more horizontal. And here is the same again with residual, and residual waste has the most obvious impact of the trend line becoming more horizontal. So next is KPIs. These are Amey KPIs. Target is included. Also previously, it was requested that the amount of assisted collections has been included, so that's in the table now. So for Elmbridge, KPIs 1 is low, not low, sorry, below target, and then KPIs 2 to 5 are low. For Mole Valley, KPI 1 is below target, KPI 2 is relatively high, 3 is low, 4 has decreased, as you can see, and then 5 is low. Surrey Heath, KPI 1 is below target, KPI 2 has decreased, and then KPIs 3 to 5 are low. And then Woking, KPI 1 is below target, KPIs 2 to 3 are still relatively high. I've discussed this with ops, and we're going to review that in the next few months to see what it is from January onwards. And then KPIs 4 to 5 are low. That is the end of my presentation. If there's any questions.
Okay, thanks, Kingsley. If I kick off with Elmbridge questions, then we'll run around to other members. Yes, so yeah, garden waste tonnages. I mean, that's understandably a bit skewed by the fact that in June 22 we didn't collect garden waste for a few months, or had a very
correct, Councillor. Yeah.
I suppose reasonably pleasing that our recycling rolling rate is 54.2%. I know that we've got a government target, haven't we, of trying to get 55% recycling by 2025. So we are going to have to sort of take measures to try and improve that, I guess. So we're almost there, and in some boroughs and districts we are actually exceeding the 55%. But it's, you know, perhaps a little bit of concern that it seems to have plateaued, that we don't seem to be getting more recycling. Yeah, so and I was just going to say on the KPIs, I think that's a pretty good set of figures. So well done to Amy on those figures. We've got missed collections the lowest of the year so far in Q3. Assisted collections seem to be going in the right direction as well. Repeated missed collections, not too bad. I suppose I'm a little bit concerned about the repeated missed collections. If there are 21 in October and November repeated missed collections, then that's 21 fairly annoyed, upset customers. So it is still something that we need to keep a certain amount of pressure on. But thanks for that, Kingsley.
You're welcome, Councillor.
I can't see any hands now. I seem to have lost everybody.
Shall I go, Councillor Tilling?
Yeah. Thanks, Melvin.
Thank you. I don't really have many questions. Good to see that garden waste is back up, as Councillor Tilling said. It's skewed, so I would be very keen to see. I'm very looking forward to what next year's figures are going to be. Just a question with regards to the missed collections target, and we're talking about it's below target. Are we, because when you compare that KPI to the other KPIs, obviously they're two different analyses. KPIs 2 through 5. If you're below target, it's good. No, if you're below target, it's good. But KPI 1, if you're below target, it's also it's the opposite. If you're below target, it's bad. But if you're below target on KPI 1, is good. So are we able to just identify that when we're reporting? Because obviously, if you're below the 80 missed collections, that's good. If you're above it, it's bad. So it's just it's just kind of making sure that we have that clearly delineated in the reporting, but that's just more of a stylistic request from me. Just with regard to the rolling rate of recycling, I agree with Councillor King. I'm very glad with Surrey Heaths that Surrey Heath is now 8th in the country, so I'm very happy. But I also agree with Councillor Tilling that I think there is a plateauing happened, especially with the residual waste, especially in Surrey Heath, increasing. That's something I would like to examine further. But it would be, what is the plan to increase recycling? I don't know. I don't know. So that's something we can really kind of discuss and solve right now. But there are the government targets. How are we going to meet them, and how are we going to exceed them? I think, as Kelly and Joe know, I want to be the high. I want to climb up the ranks. So it's just what is the next steps? Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Morgan. Any response, Kingsley, or shall we move on?
I'm happy to come
Kelly.
in on that one. Yeah, if it
Right,
helps.
thanks.
Apologies, I just had someone at my door, so I was trying to sort that out. So yeah, essentially we've got obviously SEP 2025, which kind of outlines our approach. But in that, we've said that we would do an annual review, if you like, in terms of updating it based on emerging policy and stuff that we know. So we are due to do a review of that, which will be commencing in about a month's time, to be honest. What we want to do as part of that is obviously look at performance across the authorities and how everybody is comparing. And then aligned to that, we've obviously got both the SEP and joint contract work programmes as well, which identify projects to look at how we can, continue to improve performance. So we've obviously still got, I think it's about I can't remember off the top of my head now, but there's still sort of somewhere in the region of about 20 to 30,000 properties that don't have food waste collections across Surrey, that we need to finish rolling that out to by the end of March 2026. So that'll obviously be a positive. And then really, in terms of making any significant change, for us, it's going to be about looking ahead to the new service arrangement, and what is it that we want to design into that, which will be guided by the emerging policy, of course, and also kind of, your desires, if you like, in terms of how do we want to do things, and we know that, the evidence is there that if you can either restrict people's ability to throw away residual waste, either through a smaller bin or, you know, less frequency in collection and stuff like that. They're really difficult decisions, you know, for people to make, but they are the things that, you know, show that they do improve the performance from a recycling perspective. So it's that sort of stuff that we need to be talking about as we look towards the new service arrangement to see what the appetite is and how we want to take that forwards.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Kelly. Right, shall we come to Rosemary next?
Thank you. I think quite a lot of the points have been covered. We do want to see movement rather than plateauing. We were very pleased with the food waste figures from particularly from flats, and you know, that's really good. I had some questions on the tables in the papers, and I'm looking at trying to work out what page it is. Page 18, the Mole Valley bit anyhow. 17.
17, yeah.
Yeah, 17, sorry. Yes, I'm just trying to work out from my notes what it was. Yeah, it's just how these numbers are arrived at. So I was looking at the total tonnages and the average daily tonnages for recycling residual waste. And I found it difficult to understand why there is a negative change in the total tonnage and positive change in the average daily, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Yeah, I'm just trying to get those numbers up for myself. Sorry, Councillor, which material were you looking at?
So if you look at the total figures, total waste and recycling.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So it's minus 3.1% on the total tonnages, but the average daily tonnages apparently go up considerably.
So the total, that is interesting. So the average daily tonnages are collection days only. So that probably has a slight effect on what it is, while total tonnages, while average daily tonnages is collection days only, doesn't include any days that there was no collection. So that could make the difference.
Different numbers of collection days. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just going to add on to that as well. Sorry to butt in. On the residual waste that's collected at the curbside, because the collection pattern in Mole Valley is everyone has a residual collection one week and everyone has a recycling collection the other. Therefore, the number of residual collection days in a month can change quite significantly. You can, whereas in other boroughs where it's split 50-50, you have everything collected every day over the course of a month. So the working days pattern can fall a bit differently. In Mole Valley, you can sort of almost have a week less or several days less of residual waste collections, just depending on how that pattern falls in the calendar month.
Okay, thank you. And I had another question on the quarterly indicators. Now, this ties up with what Morgan was saying. It's actually very helpful to have colours on these things. So for the KPIs, it would be really useful so we can see which are above and which are below. So the quarterly indicators, I noticed we've all got, I think we've all got red for the total waste and recycling per person. Now, is this a result of the garden waste issue that we had the previous year? Because we've got red on that, whereas it's green on recycling rate.
Yeah, that could be a factor. That last quarter would have less overall tonnage because we didn't have our green waste service was suspended. While this year green waste is back to normal, so that would probably be a reason why there's an increase for that. Yeah, that's probably the most realistic, the most obvious reason.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's difficult to compare when it's total, given the variation with the garden waste. I think that those are the only questions I had, but yes, the main takeaway is we need to improve, don't we? We need to continue improving our recycling rate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rosemary. Kelly, did you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, it was a point that was raised earlier. Thank you. That I just wanted to kind of reiterate because Rosemary raised it again, which is in relation to the kind of, plateauing of the performance and the statistics. I just wanted to reassure you that that isn't just us, that's a national picture. It's not sort of anything specifically that's happening in Surrey. And actually, to reassure you, we've actually held our own more than other authorities have. So when the DEFRA statistics were released last month or the end of January, we overall as Surrey, previously we were in 3rd position and we're now in joint 2nd position. And our performance from the recycling rate did take a slight decline, but others were hit worse than we were. So like I say, it is a national trend that's happened. And I think it's kind of the fallout from, post-pandemic and people reverting to different ways of working and what have you, with more people being at home. So it's about, how can we stabilize that and how can we start to turn that around, to positively impact our performance. But overall, what we are seeing is that, the volume of waste per household is declining, which is, a positive thing. And when we do the review of SEP 2025, we'll be looking at performance against the targets. And although it's kind of the county-wide targets, behind that, we'd set some sort of guideline, indicative measures for each authority so that we can see if everybody's generally moving in the right direction. So we'll be providing an update on that as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Well, I need to come to Peter, but John, did you have something specific about Mole Valley before we go on to Woking?
It's related to what Kelly was just saying. Thanks, Chair. It was I just wanted to ask. You mentioned the DEFRA statistics that were published recently. I think previously, and I'm going back a few years now, Joint Waste Solutions produced a kind of summary of the national picture and how Surrey and individual councils compared to that. Are you intending to do that?
Yeah, that's already on its way, funnily enough. So that would it's completed. It's just being in the review stages. So we'll be doing the headline results for 22-23.
Thanks very much. That's great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Right, Peter, Woking.
Yeah. A couple of comments actually on the report. I just wonder if we can make the comparisons, make it possible to compare like with like, because if we go to page 8 of the report, which is page 10 of the whole document, it starts with Surrey-wide performance, which is great, and it talks about in the year to 2023. We then go through to the joint waste one on the next page, and that describes quarter 3, 23 to 24. So we're not actually comparing between those two paragraphs. We're not comparing exactly the same. And then when we go down to each individual authority, again, it seems to go back to the year to December 2023. Having said that, of course, Kingsley's since trumped that because your presentation compared like with like. But reading the document, it would have been useful if that had been set out so that we could compare Surrey and the authorities and the JWS on the similar basis. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are, Councillor. I'm just wondering if it's more of a me writing badly than
well, it may well be. Yeah.
Yeah, it might well been. I'm just double checking that because I would assume that when I say in quarter 3, 23, 24, I do mean up to December 23, but I will make sure that is clearer in my next report. Yeah.
In no particular
but yeah, I can definitely do that, Councillor.
Thank you. In no particular order, then the other points I just noted was food waste. I'm not sure, Kelly, how much, and perhaps you can comment, how much impact getting the flats on board with food waste, that the flats that so far haven't been onboarded, getting them on board is going to make to the overall recycling rates. 25,000 flats against the number of dwellings in Surrey is not a huge amount. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is I'm still overall concerned that our food waste rates are not good enough. And I'm sure it's the same across the country. And talking to people that live in flats, yes, that's one of the main obstructions, is actually having a food caddy in a small kitchen. So that was one comment. Tonnages are down. We talked about this before, but some of that's economics. People are buying less, and packaging is reducing in weight. So I think that accounts for that. A question for you, and I'll speak. Apologies. Did Mark send in his apologies, Mark Tab? No, because if he didn't, I'm sending them now. Yeah, he did. Okay. I was talking to him yesterday and suggesting that instead of comparing calendar months with calendar months, because they do vary by several days, and as I think, was it Joe just explained, it does mean that you can have a week out from one, particularly for those of us that have a 2-week rolling collection system. Is that correct? You're nodding, so I think, but you understand what I'm saying. Would it not be sensible to block it, to simply compare or block the year into 4-week rolling, 13 blocks of 4 weeks, so then we can compare exactly week with week, and even quarter with quarter, although dividing 13 by 4 is going to cause problems. But I do you see where I'm coming from, because it is actually, that has a huge impact on the stats, as you described earlier, Joe. I mean, my overall impression, and this is sort of nationwide as well as Surrey-wide, is that the residual waste is the one that we need to bring down. Residual and food waste, and I'm concerned, as everybody is, that residual waste is static, and in fact a slight increase of 0.6%, which you would have expected, bearing in mind that of what I said earlier, economics and the weight of packaging, weight of everything really, that it should be going down in terms of tonnages, but it isn't. So that's a real concern to me. Sorry, lots of things there, and I don't know who's going to come back to me on that, but Joe looks like she's poised to jump in.
It's all right, I'll come in first.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait.
So yeah, it's a valid point that you make in relation to the rollout of the food waste collections at the remaining flats. We will expect it to have an impact, but there are some areas such as Woking where the majority of the properties have already got that collection. So, there's nothing to roll out effectively. Well, really, I think you've got about 100 odd properties or something that haven't got it. Even the sort of remainder that you've had, like you say, there will be an uplift, but how much of an impact will it have? I think for me, the food waste collection service has been in Surrey for over 10 years, largely now from, when it was first initiated. And it's kind of finding a way to reignite people in engaging with that service. So we do a lot of activity through the SEP work programme, where we look at areas of low participation and, try and encourage people to make use of it. But again, it's kind of that, it's coming up with a way that effectively makes people make use of it rather than having a choice, if you like, is the way that you're going to get more participation in that. At the moment, it's very easy for people just to put their food waste within their residual waste and get rid of it. So that's the bit that we really need to think about to look at increased participation. And in terms of the comparisons on the figure, I completely feel your pain. Looking at statistics on a regular basis and seeing different comparators of weeks and months and quarters and years and everything else is a nightmare. Personally, I prefer to look at things on full years, and whether that means that part of the year is a forecast and part of it is an actual, or doing comparisons like that. It gives you the best picture, because you've got so many seasonal variations. You've got some years where you've got 2 Easters in a year and no Easter in another year, and things like that. So looking at kind of, the full year comparison for me is the easiest way to get some kind of comparison, but it is something that we'll take away and have a look at as to how we can present that going forwards.
Yeah,
Joe?
I mean, a week by week, comparing the week 5 in this year compared to week 5 last year, I mean, that strikes me as quite a good way of doing it. But again, as you rightly point out, Easter makes a huge difference, and that could shift from 1 week to what it will shift across several weeks, 4 weeks probably. So
and also the weather. you know, because
I
if
think,
it's
yeah.
wet and there's recycling out that gets wet, if it does get picked up, that's heavier, you know, so there's so many different things that can
Very
impact it.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'd be happy with sort of slightly less granularity to the figures. So we have, you know, probably annual plus quarterly, because we meet on a quarterly basis anyway. So we could have the previous quarter, compare that with the same quarter in the previous year, but also sort of running total of the annual collection figures. So I think breaking it down to monthly and weekly is perhaps a little bit too much detail, and we just get bombarded with figures.
That's more the approach like I tend to take, like I say, because then you get that higher level comparison.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Were there any other points? I think, Joe, you were going to come in, weren't you, to other points that Peter was making?
I mean, I think they've probably been covered off, but I definitely think there's probably going to be a meeting going in the diary for me, Kelly and Kingsley, just to talk about, you know, that feedback as in the round and how we might be able to, you know, look at what figures are going into the report that might help clarify some of that, and thinking about some of the KPI feedback from Morgan and Rosemary as well, about how we can kind of tweak the color coding or anything else just to make some of those stats clearer. Because yes, 80 per 100,000 is just definitely a ceiling we don't want to hit, rather than a target we aspire to. So yeah, we can make that clear. But yeah, I appreciate those. I've made a note of a lot of those comments, and I'm sure Jenny will have captured some too, but we can talk about.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, it is the residual waste that I think Kelly's already mentioned, reducing the size of the bins, reducing the regularity of collections, and assuming that as we pick up simpler recycling, that some of that will kick in anyway. So, I mean, we can't lose sight of the fact that that will have a huge impact on on how we go forward. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Rosemary.
Sorry, just following on that discussion about the stats. I read in the statistics about the fly tipping volumes, and really those figures mean nothing without some contextualization, because presumably it's being reclassified, so it's very difficult to know overall whether fly tipping has gone up or gone down as a whole. Does that make sense? Because there
fly
are
tipping,
huge changes in the figures. Yeah,
fly tipping is difficult because it's a random event, so it's harder to. So, Joe, I don't know if there is a way that we could look at incidents reports instead of tonnage. I don't know if that's better.
Yeah, I think, I mean, potentially maybe there's a couple of issues here. Councillor Hobbs, I think there's obviously commentary in the report about some material classification at the weighbridge, and that's impacting how the tonnages are being recorded at the moment. So I think we need to pick that up as we go through and understand how that might have changed as though those sort of we can correct that effectively. But equally, yeah, the point Kingsley's making, I think, you know, the tonnages, that could be lots of small fly tips or two very big ones, and it's hard from those numbers in the way that you know, tonnage does, you know, go up and down all the time. So we could look at including some incident data as well into this report, just to give it some additional context too. So yeah, on both sides.
Yeah, I think it's important. We've had some incidents recently which are actually not on public land, they're on National Trust land, but it's commercial scale fly tips, and the tonnages will be enormous. So I suppose the tonnage is relevant in some contexts, but yeah, I was interested to know what they were, and then when I looked at the figures, it's very difficult to tell whether there's an increase or a decrease. Thank you.
Okay, Kelly, your hand is up.
Yeah, so again, I was just going to come into this one because fly tipping is really, really difficult. You know, like you say, the tonnages can skew them, but also so can the incidences. So if you take, for example, a charity bank, and the charity bank's full and people leave their bags of textiles and stuff around it, Some people will class that as one single fly tip. Some people will record it as a fly tip per bag that is left. So then the number of incidents could suddenly become 20 because there's 20 bags as opposed to it being one. So it's really difficult with fly tipping to actually do those direct comparisons. So I think if we do, both sets of data, so you've got incidents and tonnages, it does give you a bit more of a balanced, transparent picture of what's going on.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, any more questions on that part of the agenda? If not, we'll go on then. So item number 5 is the AMI Improvement Plan update. Danielle, over to you.
Good afternoon, all. Just bear with whilst I share my screen. And we were able to see the slides?
Yes, that's good to me.
Perfect. So just a brief update for you. So today I've planned just an update on service, an update on the business continuity plan, and then finally that improvement plan that we've already spoken about this afternoon. So firstly, just an update on the 4 areas. So Elmbridge, we've had some disruption to services between Christmas and New Year, which led to delays on multiple rounds and some collections made one day following the scheduled day. So that led to an increase in reported missed collections. The good news is that we've seen the depot recover from that, and the performance through January, February shows a positive improvement, and we're returning to those levels that we were at previously. In Mole Valley, we've seen a worsening performance in the service delivery due to a number of employee issues at the depot. So we made some quite significant changes in the managerial staff at the depot, and we're just kind of dealing with that turnover staff at the moment. We do now have a full complement of new management team in place, and we are seeing the rewards of that filter through. And then in terms of Surrey Heath and Woking, the numbers are relatively low and depots performing where we would expect them to in terms of those KPI targets.
Danielle, was there a particular reason for that disruption you stated in Elmbridge?
So between Christmas and New Year, we suffered a lot of staff absences above the ordinary ceiling that we would allow. So we have annual leave ceilings, which we set. We obviously allow people to book leave between Christmas and New Year. And then on top of that, we had additional absences. So we've taken that away this year as to whether we need to increase those annual leave ceilings at that time of year, but plan to have additional people in from the agency, etc., to cover that. And that's very much an action for us to look at before we get to this time again, or the same time again this year.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of the business continuity plan, so we've briefly spoken on this in previous meetings. The business continuity plan has been refreshed for the contract. There is an outstanding action for that plan to be tested, and currently the live
We've lost
Danielle, I
that.
think we lost
I've just
audio.
lost you, Danielle. No, we can see you, but not hear.
risks to the service at the minute, and a communication strategy between the depot. Can you hear me? I don't know. I'm unmuted.
Can you go back, Danielle? We missed some of what you said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
we can.
yes, that's better.
So the only risk to services at the minute are the severe weather incidents that we might see. So we've got a specific plan in place for that, which has a flowchart of communications between depots, myself and JWS. And we're starting to see activity for the 2024 pay review, which is due from the 1st of April, and we are in discussions with both unions currently. Any questions?
No, obviously,
Yes.
obviously we're concerned about the pay review, but we'll have to just await the outcome of those discussions.
No problem.
Can I go
And,
back and ask?
Rosemary's got her hand up.
Rosemary's got a question.
Thank you. It's I'm sorry, I missed my opportunity. It was on the Mole Valley performance, and I just wanted to ask about the effect of vehicle outages, because I understand there have been significant problems where we haven't had enough vehicles.
So in terms of waste collection vehicles, the performance tends to be a bit better in Mole Valley because they have a slightly newer fleet than elsewhere. So whilst we may get short-term disruption based on very specific incidents with vehicles, we don't tend to have to hire in additional fleet to support the waste collections. Where we are seeing disruption at the minute in Mole Valley is with the street cleansing vehicles. So there's the sweeper at the minute is off the road and has been for quite some time due to the fact that a member of the public tried to squeeze past the vehicle when it was out working, and unfortunately caused quite a lot of significant damage to the side of the vehicle. In doing so, the driver didn't stop, they drove away from the scene. So that vehicle is now having to go through hefty repair. We are waiting on an update from the workshop on that. It's at a third-party workshop, and we will make an assessment whether to hire in against that, should it not be coming back very shortly.
I understand that's been going on for some time, though. So do you not have other vehicles you could be drafting in?
That specific incident was within the last 2 to 3 weeks. So it hasn't been what we would deem a long period of time in terms of awaiting repairs to a vehicle. We've had incidences where vehicles have been away much longer than that. The Elmbridge large mechanical sweeper, for example, was off the road for a significantly longer time, and we have hired in against that. That vehicle actually is over at Mole Valley at the minute, so we're sharing the vehicle between the 2 depots whilst we await an update on the large mechanical sweepers that are elsewhere.
Thank you.
Moving on to the improvement plan for 24-25. So I've broken this down into various different elements. So the first bit on here is zero code, which is our health and safety element. So at the top there, we've got the employee assistance program, which is a support service available to our employees and their families to give advice for support for mental health issues, finances and legal advice. We've got an online digital GP service, so realising that there's a gap for employees getting GP appointments, etc., and the length of time they might be absent from work due to wait times locally, we have a digital service that them and their families can access. We've got an annual occupational health surveillance set up in place, and we're working through that currently. Around 50% of our employees have been through that surveillance to make sure they're fit and well to be carrying out the physical roles they're doing. We've got an action to review the route round risk assessments. So that's logging all the hazards that our crews might come across on their digital tablets so that when they're out and about working, they have as much information as possible to keep them safe out on the road. Safety stand down days are safety events whereby we hold the entire depot back for a couple of hours in the morning, and we'll go through various safety elements. The first one of those is planned within the next month. And then, as I already touched on, the testing of those business continuity plans. That's that for zero code. Would you like me to stop at each section, or should I present the full report? And
Yeah, I think you could keep going now, Danielle.
okay, no problem. So on to operations, we've got route optimization in Woking. So we're currently carrying out a project in Woking and Surrey Heath jointly, whereby we're looking at the data sets that we've got in white space, particularly around communal collections and Schedule 2 properties, making sure that all the containers and assets are correctly assigned to rounds before we look at reviewing the efficiencies of the working in both of those depots. Given that they neighbour each other, we'll also be considering whether there's any opportunity for cross-boundary working. And once we've got some modelling on that available, we will, of course, liaise with JWS to present that. And then finally, a review of the KPIs 3, 4 and 5. just to see if we can drive any efficiencies in terms of the missed bin collection time, and reviewing the repeat miss to see if there's an easier way to capture that, so that it can be calculated for invoicing purposes a lot easier. And then the final point in there is just improving the Wee & Textiles service. There's been a number of projects that have taken place in the last 12 months that have been very successful around putting Wee & Textile recycling into communal properties and having them visited on a rotational basis. So we want to take the positives from that and further improve the service across other areas. There's quite a lot of work still to be done in terms of white space and IT. So we've identified some improvement opportunities for container control, so better control of our stock and sharing stock amongst sites. We've got an action there to assign the SLAs correctly. So currently, if a resident reports a miscollection at the weekend, it will send that miscollection to a crew, even though the crews are not in until the Monday morning. So we need the system to be able to identify the working hours that we have. We've got a couple of dashboards in the process of being made, one for invoicing purposes and one for variable invoicing. As I mentioned, we're in the process of doing that data cleanse on white space to ensure the correct assets are assigned to the correct rounds. We'd like to look at putting identification numbers on litter bins, so that when we get complaints about litter bins, we can identify them more specifically to an exact point. We'd like to improve the in-cab usage on street cleansing, so that work can be sent to crews and there can be greater visibility of which jobs are completed and which are outstanding. And then we'd like to put a plan in place so that when a communal bin is logged as contaminated, a refuse return can automatically be generated for the crew to return. For garden waste, we'd like to drive online payments for service and renewals. We'd like to come up with a way to identify subscribers on the actual garden waste container to make life easier for the crews. Currently, the only method that a crew can use to determine whether a resident's paid for their garden waste subscription or not is via the iPad tablet in the cab, which if the driver has access to that tablet and the crews are out collecting bins, it's not the best method. So we'd like to look at a better way of doing that. We're looking at
Danielle, sorry, can I just interrupt? On my screen, I've got a sort of fudged image of the white space and the garden waste below it. So it's it doesn't seem to have fully gone onto the garden. There, that's it. So if you go back to that garden waste slide, I can see the white space on the screen at the moment.
Oh,
now it's just, that's it. We've got it now. Yep, thanks.
Apologies. Power BI dashboard for the garden waste, so we can see where we've got high numbers of subscribers and also cancellations for each of the boroughs that we look after for Woking and Surrey Heath, so that we can identify any improvement opportunity for driving that subscriber number. And automatic renewal notices. Currently there's a manual process in place, so we'd like to look at a more efficient way of that process being carried out. And then finally on the improvement plan is around fleet and maintenance. So we're carrying out a review of our workshop structure. We've already mentioned previously that vehicle reliability is becoming an issue with the age of the fleet that we've got. So we're looking at what we can do to support that and improve the amount of time that we have vehicles off the road. So we're looking at putting a late shift into the workshop, improving the end of day defect reporting process, so how we can rectify issues at the end of the day rather than waiting till the following morning when rounds may then be delayed and affected. We want to look at the work that third parties do for us and see whether we can bring some of that in-house to improve the response time. And we're also looking at making some changes to our tyre repair policy in terms of whether we can do some of that in-house by training up some of our existing staff, so we don't have to rely so much on third parties. And that is the end of my presentation today.
Good, thank you very much. That's been very thorough. Can I just come back to you on the street cleaning? It's quite a big issue around Elmbridge that we've still got a number of streets where that sort of leaf litter is still spread across the road as a sort of brown mush when it rains. I seem to think we've got a bit of an issue about reporting these streets, in that when I have tried to report them, it tells me that these have already been reported and will be dealt with, but then 3 or 4 weeks later, they still haven't been dealt with. So I know that your intense period of street cleaning stopped at the end of December, but we still seem to have a lot of streets that haven't been cleaned at all.
I think if any of those streets can be escalated, Councillor Tilling, I'm happy to take those to the depot specifically. I know that I've got a list of around 3 or 4 for Elmbridge currently, that we've got plans to put parking notices out, etc., so the crews can get to those roads and carry out the cleaning required, but happy to assess each of those high impact areas on an individual basis and provide a plan on how we're going to address them.
Okay, well, I'll send perhaps a little list via Agogo, shall I? And she can then forward that to you.
That's perfect.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. I don't know who put their hand up first. Shall we come to ladies first, Rosemary?
Thank you, Ashley. It's following up on street cleaning, and I was interested in the presentation, Danielle, on in-cab. Can you please explain what you mean by in-cab?
No problems, Councillor Hobbs. So all of our waste collection crews have something similar to an iPad device in their vehicle, which will have their work on it for the day. So the majority of work for waste collections is routine work that's the same every single week. It cycles round. With the street cleansing, it's often more ad hoc work. And there'll be an element of routine in there that we know our crews are visiting on a twice weekly basis. So we're having conversations with the crews at the moment in Mole Valley to understand which jobs they're going to routinely, because they're high traffic areas such as the town centres, etc., so that we can build some basic routes that are then visible as to where those crews have been. And then on top of that, we can send ad hoc work to them. So if we get a fly tip, for example, or an overflowing litter bin, we can send that to their tablet, and we'll be able to track when that job was done, to give a greater visibility and feedback to JWS and the customer.
Okay. Do you use, so you don't use photographic evidence as a monitoring tool?
On the in-cab device, they have the option to add a photo to any work that they've completed. So if they have done a large job, they're able to take photos of that, and then that will be on that job to see on our background system, Whitespace. So anyone that logs in will be able to see those photos.
Obviously, that would be very helpful to us where we've got areas where we feel there are defaults, because there are certainly areas that haven't been cleared, as Ashley was saying, with a lot of mushy detritus that's been there for a considerable length of time, and many of those have been reported. So it's the monitoring I'm thinking about. You know, if there were photographic evidence, that would be extremely helpful.
Okay, right. Let's come on to Peter.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, thank you very much, Danielle, for the presentation. It's very interesting and good to see those improvement measures. The main thing I wanted to focus on was the garden waste, because about 10 months ago, I had a flurry, if not a flood of messages saying my bin's been labelled and I wasn't warned, and it's been left full as well. Which is kind of a double whammy, and I would really like to see that system changed to a system whereby the label goes on 2 weeks before. I think I've said this before, 2 weeks before the end of the subscription, rather than the day of the end of the subscription. I can't see that there's a major logistical problem for that to happen, because you clearly know when the subscription is ending, and it would simply be a question of adding the label 2 weeks before, because the agitation is caused by the fact that they've then got a full bin for the next week, and it generally happens when it's the big collection season. So I just wonder if that could be addressed. question I often get as well is about renewing online. And I think I remember correctly that if someone's renewing 2 bins, it's impossible to do it. It has to be done by a phone call, but I might be wrong. Just so you can correct me there. In other words, it wasn't possible for someone to do it all online without going through. So that leads me on to suggest that we should be looking at, and I think you mentioned this, at direct debiting, so that we don't have to renew annually, that it just gets direct debited. And I think that would be a great system, because it saves a lot of work, and it saves people from remembering. So that's the thing. Picking up on what Rosemary's just said, I'm surprised, I suppose. I don't know whether this is it's something that, too much of intrusion into people's lives, but I'm kind of surprised that in order to avoid accusations of non-presentation of bins, we don't actually video the round, so that when a bin is not presented, you've got evidence to show that it wasn't presented, and then or on the other hand, we can show that it definitely was presented and it was a miscollection. So maybe this is the wrong forum. Maybe that's too much of an intrusion into people's lives, but I'm surprised it isn't offered in some way at the moment. Perhaps it will be. So those are the 2 main comments. The garden waste, can we move it to 2 weeks before the end of subscription? Can we make sure that we implement direct debiting? And just a quick look at the way that the actual renewal happens online at the moment, and perhaps move to direct debiting. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll take those points to make out.
Do you mind if I just pop in? I think historically with the previous IT system, you're right, Councillor Graves, that multiple bin subscriptions, there were issues with doing some elements of renewals online. The majority of that was fixed when the Whitespace system was brought in, and so there's a lot more functionality to the online subscription and renewal process than there was previously. But I do know that we've also had some feedback around sort of the wording on the form in places. So it is on the sort of to-do list to try and look at that and review it and see if we can tweak or improve the way that form actually looks when the residents use it, to make sure it's absolutely clear. You know, if there's any bits that we need to make sure they're answering as clearly as possible in terms of whether they require additional containers, etc., that's getting kind of done right first time when those forms are filled in.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you want to comment on the whether we could move to direct debits, Joe?
Yes, I mean, direct debit is a requirement of the specification for the Garden Waste Administration Service for the areas where Amey operates that. Currently, with the setup that is in Whitespace, there isn't a facility to use direct debits at the moment. It is on in a list of areas that have been identified as currently sort of not compliant in terms of the specification. We've had some discussions with Amey about those. A lot of them were around the IT, and Whitespace had improved many of them. But really, we need to move that conversation forward with Amey further, because either that needs to be implemented, or they do need to come to us with a proposal to kind of effectively formally amend the specification, and we'd need to bring that back to the authorities to see whether that was possible, because as it stands at the moment, Whitespace can't manage that. But it is a requirement that should be getting delivered. We know it's not functioning currently, and we need to resolve that.
Yeah. And my question about the labelling, is that something that we can look at?
I think it is, but I need to understand. I think we need to understand the practicalities of it. The crews have the information about who has a live subscription, but on that in-cab, they don't necessarily have details of who is nearing the end of it, if that makes sense, when they're actually out on the ground. So I think we'd need to understand how we could facilitate that. Obviously, what they do is put the hanger on once the subscription has expired, because they see a bin, the bin is not on their in-cab list, and they notify the resident that, you know, sorry, we couldn't empty it because your subscription is not active any longer. So it's just really walking that through, I think, with Danielle, to understand, is there a way that we can do that? The reminders do go out. Residents do get contacted by letter or email at least 20 working days before, and we do have a reminder process in operation as well to follow many of those up if the renewal hasn't happened. But as Danielle said, there is a process at the moment looking at automating that, which will also enable those us to use text message reminders, I believe, as well, which we hope might be more effective than things sort of landing in a flurry of emails in someone's inbox. It might be, sort of more in some, in your face a little bit, if you like. If you get a text message, it's a bit more unusual to get an unexpected text. So yes, we can take it away, but at the moment we need to think about how we can make sure that that's information is available to crews in a practical way and doesn't impact actually their ability to complete around increasing the time they take at individual properties to check data.
Yeah, it strikes me as an IT issue that really needs to flag up. It has a flag that comes up 2 weeks before, but I can understand the issue. I mean, with the notifications, the way that the number of complaints I get and the location of the complaints I get tends to indicate that actually it is a location problem, in that it'd be a whole street which receives their notification, and it won't be because the subscriptions will run out on the same day. It's just that Amy on that day have decided that street, they'll look at their in-cab register and they'll check it, whereas it might not actually be that day that the subscriptions run out. Am I clear?
I think so. I think what you're saying is that somebody's subscription might have lapsed on previous weeks and they hadn't been notified, and then in one go everybody who's got that same issue in the road gets flagged. That's interesting feedback. That's something that is worth talking through with Danielle to see why that sort of lag, if you like, happens in terms of, and then everybody gets sort of the same notification in the same day.
And it's not just once. It's that I can recall twice recently when it's happened. 10 subscribers suddenly all at once. It just doesn't, which doesn't really stack up. But anyway,
thanks for that extra information. I think that's one for us to look into definitely in more detail.
Okay. Danielle, did you want to come back on any of those points?
Just an acknowledgement that we'll take it away and jointly work through some of those suggestions on the improvement plan.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Right, if there are no more questions on the Amy updates, we'll move on to item 6, which is the quarterly budget report.
Thank you, Councillor. That's over to me. So I'm just trying to find the right screen to share. Apologies, just need to apologies, I'm not familiar with presenting on Zoom, so I can't share the screen I would like to, being the annex with the spreadsheets attached to it. So I'll talk to the Word document as well.
Okay.
Actually, it seems to have come through now. Is that right? Spreadsheet?
No, still can't see it.
Okay, apologies. I'll talk to the Word document. So if we look at the results for Q3, I'll start at the top with CMO costs, the Contract Management Office, which at Q3 is estimated to come in marginally under budget by 7,000, which is a 0.3 variance. But within that, there are some overspends and underspends within the budget itself. The two material ones, which explained in the Word document, are salaries and team budgets. The salaries budget is projected to have a 26,000 overspend, which incorporates the fixed pension charge that was excluded from the budget due to an accounting anomaly as identified in Q2. And the team's budget is projected to have a 26 underspend, offsetting this, mainly from reduced spending on training, travel, and parking. So we move on to the Amy's budgets. Core projection remains at 13.9 million as per the Q2 forecast. leading to an underspend of 410,000. This relates to the indexation budgeting variance. Ah, thank you. I can just see the numbers coming up there. Thank you, Joe. So if we look at the middle table here for core, we can see that the variance of 410,000, oh sorry, 409. This is due to the change in the budget for indexation, whereby we budgeted slightly higher, and it was agreed at 6.85% in January 23. Then if we look at the variable full year projection, this will be 378,000 underspend as at the present, as at Q3. And the budgetary inflation uplift element of this is 48,000. And with the other variances as noted in the reports, we have KPI elements, and there's various variances relating to containers as well. So happy to run things over in more detail if need be, but and happy to take any questions at this stage.
Good. Thank you, Jan. I'll just go back onto the gallery view so I can see everybody. Yeah, so generally quite useful in that we've got this contract underspend of 409,000. We've got the variable contract budget of an underspend of 411,000. If we do get an underspend, what happens to those sums? Are they just carried forward to the following year?
I could see Joe moving.
Yeah, well, if you want. I mean, no, I mean, obviously within the individual authority budgets, that would be, the budget holders' control to do what they would, but I don't imagine, I feel that they probably would be adopted as underspends. That would be my guess, but it would be up to the individual budget owners and the authorities to agree what exactly would be done with that. As you know, technically JWS don't have any money of our own. We just pay the invoices by Surrey Heath's finance team and recharge accordingly to each of the individual authorities. So it's not a JWS budget as such that's held.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Kelly.
Yeah, so I just wanted to pick up, and Jan, you and I can probably take this off and talk about it separately. But with the oversight on the pension costs and that kind of thing, I'm not sure if that has been discussed with the Section 151 officers, certainly outside of the joint contract, because obviously it wasn't budgeted for at the start of the year. There was a conversation previously about this isn't just around the joint contract, because obviously these salary costs also cover the SEP side of things, which, as we know, has significant financial pressures on it. So it's probably a conversation that we need to pick up separately, that if there has been a discussion between the Section 151 officers outside of the joint contract and, across the whole of partnership, we need to have that understanding, because certainly nobody's communicated that back to me.
Right, okay. I was just wondering about JWS salaries. Are they tied to Surrey County Council salary uplift or a particular borough? How does that work?
So we're administered by Surrey Heath Borough Council. Yeah. So, whatever incremental increases or cost of living increases or anything that goes through Surrey Heath applies to Joint Waste Solutions as well.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Any other questions? There is on page 24. There's a note about indexation and the fact that that's still being discussed. What sort of figure will go forward? Is there any more progress on those discussions on the indexation?
Not currently, although we heard in a meeting this morning that we might expect some correspondence on that, I think, from Amy shortly.
Right. Okay. So still very much ongoing. Okay. John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, just a quick question, clarification point, actually. I'm just, in terms of the breakdown of underspend for Mole Valley, who would be the best person? I'd be keen to understand a bit more about the individual items on there and how that's arrived at. I wonder who, just trying to find out who the best person to ask about that. Would be you, Jan, or would it be Joe? I don't know.
I'm happy to chat that through with you, John. That's
Okay,
no
yeah.
problem. We can have a separate call.
Yeah, that's lovely. I'll set something up. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, good. Thanks. Any more questions on that? I can't see any hands. Okay, good. Item number 7 then is the Joint Waste Solutions Programme Progress Report. Is that Joe? No.
That's me.
Oh, it is, right.
Yes, sorry, let me get the right bits of screen in front of me. She says. Okay, so in terms of the programme progress report, I mean, as you can see from the papers, there's a cover paper there that summarises, prepared by Nick Meadows, that includes a summary of the sort of key updates since we last met in December, and the more detailed breakdown of activity progress in the annex that's accompanying that. So I wasn't intending to talk too much around this report, really just highlight a few areas myself in terms of positive progress, I think, on some pieces of work that we're doing. And obviously take any questions or queries on those or any elements that you might want more detail on. So yeah, I think picked up in some of these bullet points, but I'll reiterate again, just because I think, you know, they are good pieces of work that the team are doing, is the progress on the litter bin projects. We've seen bins rolled out in a number of areas of Elmbridge, and some significant progress in moving towards getting new bins, street litter bins, in Surrey Heath too. The colleagues in sort of the wider team have helped with preparation of data to support the joint contract authorities in reverting to DEFRA and challenging, in some cases, the funding that's been allocated for food waste collection. So that was a useful piece of work that our colleagues helped us complete. We've had positive results from work at communal sites. Something's going on my screen, I'm not sure what. We've had positive work from some of the communal sites where there have been food waste and DMR interventions that have been carried out by the SEP-funded recycling improvements team. So some of the results there from the post-monitoring, particularly in Mole Valley on the food waste, have been really, really positive. We've been doing some additional promotion of the Rethink Waste scheme, which have seen a little spike in numbers in Woking, in particular in the last couple of weeks, from some information included with garden waste renewal details and extra information to garden waste subscribers. In terms of other project works, the materials focus funding that we got to improve weed collections saw a campaign that's recently completed to promote that service to residents who get a weekly curbside pickup of that material. We've been very keen to make sure that people realise this is something they can use regularly. They don't need to do a big clear out, and actually using the service in that way does help Amy manage the volume of material that residents present for collection. So trying to get that message across in the right way, that the little and often approach to using that service is a really good way to think of it. And alongside that, we are now, Danielle mentioned in her improvement plan, we've been working with Amy to look at how we can trial different formats of small weed collections from communal sites. So in the last few weeks, bins have gone out to some properties in the east area. We've identified a number of communal sites where we can put bins in for a short period, so 3 or 4 weeks, leave them there for people to have that opportunity to use the service, and then move those containers onto another site. Again, that's been funded by Material Focus as a trial. We're really looking forward to getting the results. One of the team is actually out seeing how those bins are being used today, so some early feedback due, which I'm really keen to hear about. And then finally, in terms of business as usual work, obviously the operations officers are always very busy dealing with customer inquiries, etc. And at the moment in particular, they're undertaking the final quarter for this year, the LAD survey for Q4. So again, that will be completed by the end of March, and we'll have those results showing how the street cleaning service is performing, and because I know that's a hot topic in some areas at the moment. So that will be a useful indicator for us on how that is performing. I wasn't going to cover anything else there, but as I said at the beginning, if you've got any questions, please do let me know if there's any clarification needed.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Can I just question the first item on your list of key updates, which is the dual litter recycling bins in Elmbridge? We've already on the streets, we've already had dual litter and recycling bins. bins. Now, some of those are being replaced through money from the Shared Prosperity Fund. Is that what you're referring to, or is this the shared dog litter and recycling bins?
Managed to lose my mute button for a moment there. Sorry. No, that is generally what I'm referring to. Is the rollout of the replacement new bins onto sort of high streets in Elbridge now.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's I forget the numbers. Something like sort of 9 or 10 so far. But if the ones that they replace, if they're in reasonable condition, then they can be refurbished and put elsewhere to replace some other really badly damaged ones.
Exactly that. Yeah, we're hoping that we can sort of refurb some of that older stock and make sure that all bins across the borough are looking as nice as they can be.
Yeah, good. Any other questions on that? No, I mean, good to see that we've got the work in the flats. So, improve recycling bins, and we've got the food waste interventions, which I think is really useful. I guess as yet in Elmbridge, the food waste interventions haven't really kind of rolled through, so we don't really know what effect that's going to have on the amount of food waste that we collect. But it's quite a big program, isn't it? 4,000 households from the 11th of February.
So yeah, there is a lot of work going on to try and make sure we know that we've got to get food out to all those properties over the next couple of years. So that absolutely is a key priority for us.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Yep. Thanks, Joe. Rosemary?
I've just got a question about the Rethink Waste schools scheme. Is there anything going directly to schools from yourselves or from SEP, or is this entirely up to us as a borough?
I'll come in on that one, shall I? I thought you'd like that, Joe. Yes, so there is. So we have already been writing to the schools from the Surrey Environment Partnership side, but I'm also aware that Sarah and Agogo have been liaising with Paul Barnett, who's looking after the Rethink Waste project, and are looking to do additional letters to the schools in the joint contract areas. So I'm not sure if those letters have actually gone out yet or if they're due to go out, but I know that that's work that's being undertaken. But obviously anything that you can do as individual authorities to try and drum up schools' engagement in your patch, then that would be fantastic. As far as I understood earlier in the week, we can have a maximum of 30 schools in a particular round of funding. I believe as of about Monday, we were on 7 so far. So obviously, if we can do more to try and encourage schools to engage and make them aware of, the funding that could be available to support an environmental improvement initiative, then that would be fantastic.
So are those 7 in the second round?
7 in the second round,
oh,
yes.
Right. So we need to get a move on because...
Yeah, because the deadline is the deadline for the second round is the 28th of March. So we've only got a week left to encourage the schools to sign up.
Okay. I was thinking from the dates that it was later than that. Okay.
No, so at the moment, the way the timeline's set, we wanted to try and do it before the Easter holidays so that we could then, commence the kind of pledges and donation of the points from the Easter holidays onwards. So at the moment, the deadline for anybody to get involved from a school's perspective, like I say, is the 28th.
Thank you.
I know that Surrey County Council have also sent emails to the heads of all the schools, and they've sent it to divisional councillors and said, please make sure you alert the schools in your division. So I think there's been quite a lot of comms about it. But yeah, it is slightly disappointing that we've had such a small take-up.
Yeah, it is. So anything that you can do to help would be very much appreciated.
And Peter?
Yeah, interestingly, I wrote to all schools in Woking, about 36 schools or something, and got no reply at all. Nobody even replied, so I was a bit disappointed. It may be that they'd already had messages, but that's by the way, really. I've written just quickly about the CPR, and I'm just hoping, I'm sure we are keeping on top of that, but it is orange at the moment. There's so much work to be done, and the way I understand it is we're not really totally clear yet on where we've got to go with it. So it's not entirely our fault. And the only other thing was it's good to see the working with SEP about decarbonisation. And was it Runnymede, Ashley? Yeah.
So they're running their fleet on HVO, aren't they?
Yeah. Which, I mean, is an interesting one, because I think when we had that presentation, it came out as the most sensible thing to do, but it's not, in my mind, necessarily the most suitable, because of where the provenance of the fuel, where it's coming from, how far it's got to come, or what it's made from. So, but I'm intrigued that it's obviously at the moment it's the best solution. Yeah. But yeah, so CPR, Joe, you were nodding your head.
Oh, I was just nodding because yes, I mean, it's amber because there is still so much uncertainty. So, you know, we can only do so much at the moment, and you know, I think hopefully that's reflected in the colour coding there.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies to Joe and Agogo if I'm repeating something that you've sent me something about, but I'm just interested in the litter bin plans for Mole Valley, where we have an action there is a action in the plan for identifying sites in Mole Valley. Just wondering where that's got to. I think that you were going to send me an update. I'm not sure if you may have done that, so apologies if you have, but would it be possible to have an update on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, a lot of work's been done to kind of establish what's there and what we think might be suitable in terms of reviewing and recommending. I don't believe that's come over yet, but we'll make sure that's with you ASAP, John.
Okay, thank you.
On the point that Peter made about decarbonisation, I know that in Elmbridge we've been looking at running the fleet off on HVO, because we've got a tank there at the depot that we use already to refuel our community service vehicles. Is there any progress on using that biofuel for the waste fleet?
I was under the impression that there's still some elements being ironed out with the community transport tank, so I'm not sure where that was at, because we did have some queries with Amy in terms of the siting of the tank at the depot. So I think I need to probably make sure that we're up to speed on what's happening there. I know when those conversations first started about the community transport fleet trialling that, it was Danielle's predecessor Nicola that was involved in some conversations there about how could we, you know, facilitate testing some of the Amy vehicles on that. I think the tank is of a size, obviously, that isn't on the scale that Amy operate for all the fleet, but certainly it would be a useful opportunity to see how some of the smaller vehicles on the site function. But yeah, apologies, Ashley, as I understood it, there were still some areas being ironed out with that, so I probably need to catch up on exactly where we're at and make sure we are moving that forward if we can.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Joe, that would be useful. John?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just to come back on so as we're talking about emissions and the green vehicles, one of my other responsibilities in Mole Valley is doing the carbon footprint calculations, and I just thought it might be an appropriate moment to ask about whether Amy have that information readily available. What we've used in our carbon footprint calculations this year, which is just in the last couple of weeks we've been doing this, is information that came out of the vehicle work. I can't remember which consultancy did that work actually, but Cat Porter shared that with me, and we used the carbon data from that research. Do Amy have other historical data going back in terms of earlier years from the Mole Valley contract specifically, or from the joint collection contract?
I think, John, that it's something that we have provided over the years, so it depends how far back you want to go. But if you drop us a note on it separately, we're certainly happy to pick it up and see what we've got.
That's fine. That's fine. Just thought it might be appropriate to, given we were talking about those Runnymede vehicles, I thought this is something that Mole Valley are very interested in understanding. So thanks, Danielle. I'll do that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 8, which is the work programme proposals for 24-25. Is that you again, Joe?
That's me again, and I will
Yep.
very quickly share my screen. And I've just noticed Councillor Hobbs' message about needing, obviously, to finish on time. So conscious that we don't have a lot of time. This may be circumventing the process a little bit, but we are asking for approval of the draft work programme. So if Rosemary maybe isn't able to stay on till the end of this, perhaps if we can take follow-up feedback after the meeting. Rosemary, we do have that meeting in the diary on Friday. So if there's anything that needs to be discussed there, perhaps we can review that then. It's probably a little bit naughty, Jenny. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but sorry, I'm just trying to find the right screen to share. Hopefully you have the presentation up there now.
Yes, can you see that?
In the right format, not some alternate version. Right, so I need to shuffle people around on my screen now, or I can't see the slides myself. Okay, so as I say, yes, we have undertaken a review of the existing programme for this year, evaluating the activities and considering what work we might need to be carrying forward, what work will be just continuing as a natural progression into the new financial year, and also identifying areas, new areas that we need to be included. So with that in mind, we have reviewed the objectives as well. So I'll be running through these slides, just which really just summarise the information that's provided to you in the paper. So we now have 8 objectives in the draft work programme for 24-25. We've amended a couple of these slightly, and those areas are highlighted in bold, and we have a new objective 8, which concerns in the main the future of service delivery after the current AMI contract ends in 2027. So really just picking up under objective 2, we do a lot of work around the street scene, and we realised that wasn't really picked up in any of the headings or objectives, so we've included that. And then given some areas of work that are included under objective 5, we felt the inclusion of the term compliant was also important there. And as I mentioned, number 8 is a new addition, which is concerning the review of the future delivery of services in the joint contract area. And this is also because we're looking at future service delivery, where we've opted to include reference to supporting carbon reduction plans going forward. We've moved that around a couple of times over the last couple of years, but I feel like that's the best new home for it now for next year. So under objective 1, I'll go through each of these, just highlighting a few of the key areas. Some of them will be very similar to this year. So under objective 1, like last year, we've got an emphasis on improving effectiveness of the service for customers, focusing on the way we interact with customer service teams, the way the reporting facilities and back office systems work, and in order to support management of the contract. In addition, here we've got some work to do this year on renewing our textile and weed disposal contracts. So these are the companies that either arrange collection of the material collected at the curbside from the depots or from bring banks around the borough. Those are due to expire in July, so we are commencing work on renewing those agreements with service providers there. Under objective 2, again, much of this is the same, but we do have some new initiatives being included here. So although the material focus funded improvements that we have already spoken about and have started in the current year, these will be continuing, but more of the focus going forward will be on monitoring and evaluation of the trials that we're conducting. Under Bring Bank review, we have undertaken an initial exercise to effectively baseline where we're at with Bring Banks, look at where we could see improvements, and that might be either through changing suppliers or looking at where we can add additional, for example, textile banks, because those banks can obviously generate material that goes for recycling, but also provide an income stream as well. We're looking at implementing a project where we will do some sampling from litter bins, where we've got the dual recycling litter bins in situ, looking at whether there are issues with contamination there and making sure that we can evidence the collection of that material from sort of street litter bin through to material recycling facility. We've got some contamination reduction work that has been identified in Woking, so we'll be trialling some initiatives there, and then where there's success and we can see that there are some options for repeating that in terms of best practice in the other areas, we'll be looking at how we could roll that out elsewhere as well. And we're in the process at the moment of seeing whether will be pulling together a grant bid for applying to Keep Britain Tidy for some funding to undertake some chewing gum removal from high profile or high street areas in the 3 districts and boroughs where we provide street cleaning services. The team have been working with service providers that offer that cleaning service to understand costs, etc. The deadline is tight. It is the end of this month. So we're working hard to make sure that bid is pulled together to see if we can be successful in obtaining some funding for that. And then obviously we've made sure that we have a clear activity in here about rolling out food waste recycling to flats. Obviously we do know that there's a number of properties across the joint contract area that don't have that service. We've done a lot of work to improve that in recent years, but we obviously need to stay on top of it before the March 26 deadline that we are required to meet. And as always, we've got elements in here that look at how we can benefit from the SEP initiatives that are going on across the county. Objective 3 is about, and 4 are really centred on communications activity. I think the areas that are most different here, or that are probably subject to what we can, some further assessment on what we can achieve, is around promoting the garden waste service. As Danielle said, they're doing some work to better understand the turnover of garden waste accounts and where we have sort of high levels of demand versus areas that haven't got quite as many subscriptions. So it's really a piece of work to review where we have scope to grow the service in the 4 districts and boroughs, obviously with the benefits of increasing material that's sent for composting and increased income from that service. And then community engagement events is very much dependent both on who we have available at the time and the demand that we get to partake in those events. But we are trialling some ways of working, for example, the team being able to sort of be available in either community centres or libraries. It's in its early days in Woking, testing that concept, but if it proves successful again, it's something we'd want to look at repeating elsewhere. The activities in Objective 5 and 6 are again very similar. I think the main significant change here is, and apologies for all the acronyms, I'll try and get them right, is a requirement by the end of this calendar year to be able to segregate waste upholstered domestic seating, which contains persistent organic pollutants. We worked with Surrey County Council. I'm glad I got those words out in the right order. We worked with Surrey County Council and some other Surrey authorities to make sure that we had registered the fact that we weren't able to collect this material separately through bulky waste collections currently with the EA, but there is a deadline to make sure we've addressed that by the end of this year. So we need to look at what the different options are for achieving that and what the implications are, both in terms of how we collect bulky waste and material and ensuring that it's being delivered correctly to disposal sites. Objective 6, yes, is generally around our sort of the management of this programme in itself and the governance of the joint contract arrangements and our financial processes. Under Objective 7, we obviously will be continuing to explore savings opportunities and service efficiencies, building upon work that we have done in recent years. But as well as that, we are actively going to be looking for opportunities to bid for funding that the joint contract authorities can benefit from. And then we come on to Objective 8, which is our new one, which brings together all the activities that are set out here to really review how we currently operate as a joint contract and as a group of authorities, and how we will look to operate services in the longer term. It is only 3 and a bit years till the end of the AMI contract, which at the moment feels like a long time, but obviously there is a huge amount of work to do to review not just the arrangements we have between the authorities and that inter-authority agreement that binds us all together, but also to look at what information we need to compile, what options we have in terms of service delivery beyond 2027, and then once the preferred option is agreed, how exactly we go about getting that in place and mobilising that new service that will need to operate from early June 27. As I said before, this is where we think our activity to support carbon reduction plans best sits, because we want to make sure that any new service that is taking place beyond 2027 is going to hit all those targets for net zero or carbon neutral arrangements that the authorities need to deliver on. And just the final slide is around areas of budget that have been assigned to that. So these were areas of budget that were brought forward in the December meeting and approved there. So mostly we've got sort of some communication elements generally there. The funds we've set aside for business continuity, which will be used for testing the AMI business continuity plan that Danielle mentioned earlier. Costs around the sort of governance of the meetings, quarterly meetings that we hold for the board and the committee. And then there was an element of budget agreed as well, as you'll be able to recall, around the contract re-procurement project. I will stop sharing my screen now because I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, thanks very much, Jo. Can I just a couple of questions from me? You talk about a bring bank review, which was completed. I wasn't aware that we had very many bring banks in the JW area.
Well, you don't in Elmbridge. Currently, at the moment, we have 2 sites that have got Tetra Pak banks on located in them.
Yeah.
So one in Walton and one in Weybridge, or Hersham and Weybridge. But several years ago, other banks were removed from the borough. They were mostly DMR and textiles was the other material. And the view at the time was that, given that's collected at the curbside, that was not a requirement to have those. We will be looking at whether there is a benefit to having alternative banks in place. That is part of what we'll be reviewing, to see whether that's from a sort of income stream point of view or others. But we appreciate that in Elmbridge that would be a bit more of a detailed conversation, given that there aren't any sites that have them in situ at the moment, apart from those 2.
Well, it's interesting because 3 years ago I had to work very hard to try and persuade our council to get those 2 bring banks for Tetra Paks, for food and cartons, and they have actually been quite a success. So, if we're reviewing our facility for bring banks, and in whatever 3 years' time, because of the government's waste strategy, we're going to have to collect food and drinks cartons, it might be something that we could look at as an interim measure of putting in a few more bring banks. I mean, I looked at what was around, and I could go to Waitrose in West Byfleet, which is part of Woking area, and there was a food and drinks carton bring bank there, which is quite useful, but nothing in Elmbridge. So, I did manage to get one in Weybridge and one in Walton, but then people are now saying, why isn't there one in Molesey, or why isn't there one in Esher? And I think if we can do our bit at reducing the amount of food and drinks cartons going into residual waste, which is where it has to sit at the moment, then I think we should do as much as we can.
As I say, yeah, we've done the baselining. We've got some options to review, and we'll bring different potential ideas to each of the 4 authorities on where we think there's scope to look at things differently.
Yeah, okay. And there's reference to a contamination reduction trial in Woking. Has that taken place, or is that still ongoing?
It's an ongoing piece of work where in the past, Woking's recycling rate has seen decline, and obviously from the presentation earlier, Kingsley's noted that there are improvements happening there, which is really positive. But given that they were not following the trends necessarily in the past that all the others have, there was some work done to try and identify what the root cause of that might be, and also to look at where we could carry out some activity to see if we could help improve the situation, and contamination being one of the areas which we think we will always need to address, let's be honest. Yeah. No, those trials haven't necessarily taken place, but there's work planned to deliver a range of different types of interventions, and as I say, we'll evaluate those and see where we can replicate them elsewhere if they're successful.
Right. Okay, now we mentioned Woking, so Peter's now got his hand up.
Actually, unfortunately, the bring bank in Waitrose has disappeared. Yeah, so you have to go further on that. I think it's Morrison's, but anyway, I did a lot of investigation there and upset about it. But yeah, you're right. They'll be picked up in 3 years' time anyway. But it would be good to have more bring banks for the cartons in particular. So I'd be interested to hear the result of that, Jo. You've mentioned WUDs. I wonder if mattresses are included in WUDs, because it always strikes me the mattresses are so difficult to recycle.
No, they aren't, because it's sort of, you know, sofas, dining chairs, that sort of thing. That's the focus there. But yes, mattresses probably aren't my topic of choice to expert knowledge, but they are very, very difficult to process. But possibly more a question for our county colleagues, who are unfortunately not here.
Thank you.
Okay, I see that Rosemary's had to leave us. So, Joe, when you started, did you say that you wanted us to approve the budget allocation?
It's not the budget allocation as such, but more that the programme of work is acceptable as you know, suitable to take forward, and that there aren't any changes or additions that you feel are necessary in the work we want to deliver next year.
Right. So presumably you've had to revisit some of the projects based on the fact that SEP has reduced the amount of money coming to the boroughs and districts, but it doesn't look as though that's been significant.
I think this programme sits alongside the SEP one, and it is specifically for the Joint Contract Authority. So we have that sort of different element of control over what we can include based on sort of knowing the budget allocation from the 4 authorities. Obviously, yes, the scope of what might be delivered in terms of additional work or amplification of that SEP programme of work might be impacted, but we still have made the commitment within the Joint Contract Authorities to take as much of that SEP work and really, you know, make the most of it in the joint contract area as possible. Although at the moment we can't obviously put too much detail around what exactly that might be in some cases in terms of but we know the themes of the comms campaigns, etc., and where certain interventions are intended to be taking place. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, from my point of view, I think it looks like a very thorough programme. So thank you for doing all the work on that. Any other sort of comments and questions about the work programme, whether you think there's anything missed or anything that should be included? No? Okay, right. Well, we are running a bit over time. So anyway, we're on to the last item, dates of future meetings. Next one is planned for the 20th of June. I think probably not to discuss now, but maybe just a bit of email correspondence is whether we think it's been successful holding the pre-briefing on a different day. And if we do that, whether this meeting maybe could start earlier, because to have this meeting now starting at 11:30, it sort of cuts into the middle of the day. I see no reason why we couldn't perhaps move this to a 10 o'clock start, but that might be something that we could consider for the meetings in June. Would that present any sort of problem at all for JWS or Amy if we move the start of this meeting forward? No. Okay. Well, I think that's something we should consider then. If we think this trial of splitting the pre-brief onto the Tuesday and this meeting onto the Thursday, we could perhaps shift the times around a bit. Okay, right. With that, we will meet on the 20th of June. Time to be decided. Kelly.
No, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that you said from the matters arising that I'm not sure we've completely addressed throughout the conversation. So I didn't want to kind of leave those open. Oh, yes. So one of them was in relation to the £100,000 saving that SCC were looking for. So obviously it's not directly related to the joint contract aspect, but you're aware of the conversations that have taken place through SEP members where they have reduced their they are reducing their contribution for 24-25 by £100,000. We're still obviously in discussions with SCC about the future, if you like, and we're actually meeting with them on Tuesday next week to look at how we can make the funding of SEP more sustainable and go back to having a look at that sort of medium-term financial strategy and how we can ensure that we can effectively balance things until we get more clarity on the emerging policy and how that emerging policy might work in the future. So those conversations are ongoing, so hopefully that picks up that point. And the other point was you asked for an update in terms of us reviewing the office and the space that got within Duke's Court. So we have now, apologies, Peter, we have given notice that we will be vacating Duke's Court when the lease expires in August. And we're working through effectively what that means for us. But we are going to be moving largely to a virtual office. We're not going to be having a centralised location. But we are looking at reaching out to all of the SEP authorities to effectively say, like, you know, could we make use of your council offices or your premises, you know, in the event that we need to have space for team meetings and things like that. And effectively some kind of hot desk access should, you know, a member of the team need to go in. It's particularly sort of more important on the west side from a joint contract perspective. So we will need to have some kind of location for the west team to be able to access. But all of that is being worked through. We've got a project team put together looking at it. And like I say, we're looking to having a plan in place we're aiming to leave the office basically early July, which gives us a month then to obviously do anything that we need to do to remove everything else and leave it, I'll say, in a better position than when we took it on, because it definitely is in a much nicer position than when we took it on. So I'm hoping that they don't want to invoke the clause of please leave it as you took it on, because that would be a worse state. But that's what we're working towards basically. And I'm sure you can understand for some members of staff, you know, they enjoy the presence in the office, they enjoy the interaction. So this is going to be a change for some people in how we function, and that's a sensitive situation for us to work through. But we are going to a virtual office.
So of course, Surrey County Council are vacating Quadrant Court, aren't they? Moving into the
McLaren,
the vacant McLaren office in the centre of Woking. Is there any chance of you know, getting a couple of offices and meeting space in that new building?
If we want to pay,
right.
Is probably the easiest way to say that. Okay. And we're obviously trying to avoid paying unless we really have to, which is why, you know, when you look at things like the Joint Waste Solutions full team meetings, we have a team meeting quarterly. So you're basically looking at 4 a year. And when we've got 12 authorities across Surrey, we'd effectively be coming to each authority once every 3 years to say, can we make use of your council chamber or committee room? And I'm hoping, given we're in the partnership, that, you know, the majority of the authorities would open their arms and say, yes, of course, you're more than welcome. You know, and that we wouldn't have to be looking at being charged, considering we work on behalf of all the authorities. So we're trying to do it, you know, given we're financially squeezed on on all aspects, but particularly on the SEP side at the moment, we're trying to do it on a shoestring or on zero budget, should I say, where we possibly can.
I suppose some sort of co-location with Surrey Heath would be a kind of logical match, because, you know, you use their services anyway, don't you? We do,
yes. It's not nice in the nicest possible way, Morgan. I know you're smiling at me. It's not easy.
That's what I was just about to make that same point. I said I had made that offer to JWS before, but Surrey Heath is not the most location friendly for the JWS team. So I would be more than happy to have JWS, the entire staff in the office every day, because we've got the space, but it's not workable for them. So the space is always available at Surrey Heath for you if you do need it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Right, let's draw that to a close. Thank you ever so much for those presentations and discussions, and we'll meet again sometime in June.